Classic Hollywood was filled with legendary actors, but perhaps Humphrey Bogart was one of the most talented. He began his career as an actor later than most, but a shaky start in life eventually led to a long and fruitful career. Humphrey Bogart rose above even the brightest stars, and in 1999 he was named the greatest male actor of classic American cinema by the American Film Institute. It took a few years of theater and bit parts in various films before Humphrey made a name for himself. In 1941, he was launched into stardom after acting in the 1941 films High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon. He then was nominated for an Academy Award for Casablanca. He continued to act in blockbuster films, and by 1951, he earned his Academy Award for Best Actor after starring alongside Katherine Hepburn in the World War I film The African Queen. Despite his apparent success, however, Humphrey privately struggled. His first 3 marriages ended in disaster, and he was plagued by alcoholism and health problems. Later on in his career, a scandalous affair meant this messy personal life made headlines. In today's video, we're going to delve into the deeply messy personal life of Humphrey Bogart. A rocky start. Humphrey Bogart was born into a wealthy family. His father was a famous heart surgeon in New York, and his mother was a magazine art director. Despite having a prominent, wealthy family, Bogart had trouble in school. Instead of pursuing an education, he joined the Navy to fight in World War I. He was honorably discharged in 1919 and realized he had no plans for his life. He enlisted in the Coast Guard for a while, then found work as a stage manager, which sparked his interest in theater. In 1921, he managed to land a small role, so small in fact he only had one line. He delivered his single line nervously, but even after his first performance, he knew he wanted to do more. Still, it would be nearly 20 years before he finally became recognized for his talent. Humphrey Bogart's first marriage. In 1926, Humphrey was a beginner actor. He married another actor named Helen Menken, who was far more accomplished than him at the time. She and her sister were born into a poor family, and both of their parents were deaf. Not only did she have to teach herself how to act, but also how to speak. When she was just 16, she began performing for seedy theater troupes, but she soon proved she had impressive acting abilities. The two met when Menken was playing a lead role at a theater, and Bogart was no more than a stagehand with a bit part. During the performance, a set piece fell on Menken, and she yelled and cursed at Bogart backstage for his failure. 3 months later, they were engaged. But the marriage withered, and Menken later claimed Bogart would hit and punch her. While nothing was ever confirmed, it's most likely that the two divorced because Menken was acting in a bold play called The Captive, which revolved around the subject of lesbianism. Not only was it extremely bold and taboo at the time, but Bogart began to suspect that Menken took the role because she was gay. The two divorced just a year after their marriage. Sadly, while Menken's career was booming when she married Bogart, her reputation was destroyed by the bold choice to perform in a play about homosexuality. His second marriage. Humphrey Bogart acted in the Broadway show Nerves in 1924, alongside Mary Phillips. Phillips was already an established actress, while Humphrey was virtually a nobody. Still, they were attracted to each other and began dating. In 1928, they tied the knot. One of his 4 different marriages, Humphrey's marriage to Mary Phillips was the least turbulent. They were together for 10 years, but their careers began developing separately. While Mary was satisfied with her work in theater, Humphrey wanted to move to film. He began finding work in Hollywood and by 1938 wanted to move to California to establish his career. Mary Phillips, however, knew she couldn't leave New York, and the two divorced. They separated on good terms and wished each other the best of luck. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Facts First for more. And stick around because we're going to reveal the dark side of Humphrey's longest and final marriage. Humphrey Bogart's launch into stardom. For the longest time, Humphrey was consistently cast in stale roles throughout his theatrical career. A producer was impressed by his role in the play Invitation to Murder and offered him a role as an escaped killer in the play Petrified Forest. He performed the show a total of 197 times, and even though he wasn't the lead actor, his performance garnered a lot of attention. Soon, people realized he had a talent for playing dark and gritty characters. After that, he was offered roles as a gangster or criminal in small films throughout the 30s, and in 1941, he was launched into stardom for his role in the film High Sierra. Just a year later, he was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor for his role in Casablanca. It took nearly 20 years, but finally he was an A-list celebrity. But despite his apparent success, his personal life turned out to be dark and turbulent. The affair that destroyed his third marriage. Humphrey Bogart acted alongside Mayo Mitho, which sparked a romantic attraction. The two married in 1938 and were deemed a picture-perfect Hollywood couple. But people later learned they were both heavy drinkers and nicknamed the pair the Battling Bogarts for their frequent violent attacks on one another. In fact, Mitho had once stabbed Bogart in the shoulder, and she'd been often seen with bruises on her face. Most people in Hollywood were aware of their frequent physical fights, and they even fought each other in public on numerous occasions. In 1943, Mayo attempted suicide, and Bogart asked her to see a psychiatrist. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. The same year, Bogart was cast alongside 19-year-old Lauren Bacall in the film To Have and Have Not. Bogart was 43 and used his power and influence to enter into an affair with the young woman. While many claim the couple fell in love, the stark age difference might tell a different story. Just a year later, Bogart filed for divorce and entered into a relationship with Bacall that lasted until his death. Humphrey Bogart's painful final years. Bogart's marriage to Lauren Bacall seemed happy, and together they had 2 children, Steve and Leslie. In 1955, he signed a new contract with Warner Brothers and was excited to spend the rest of his life acting. But Lauren Bacall soon noticed his persistent cough, which he'd developed years earlier due to constant smoking and drinking, had gotten worse. He started eating less, and Bacall insisted he see a doctor. The doctors announced he had esophageal cancer. They were confident at first and relieved they caught it early. Several weeks later, however, he had to have 2 of his lymph nodes, a rib, and his entire esophagus surgically removed in an operation that lasted 9.5 hours. But the cancer was still spreading, and even chemotherapy didn't work. In her memoir, Lauren Bacall described how tragically frail he was, and by the end of his life, he was just 80 pounds. He wasted away for 2 years despite the doctor's best efforts, and on January 14, 1957, he died at age 57. Despite the messy affair that led to their relationship, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall are often viewed as the perfect couple. But a huge age difference and a history of spousal abuse means things might not have been as perfect as they seem. Do you think Humphrey and Lauren were truly in love, or was their relationship darker behind the scenes? Let us know in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.